make sure everybody kind of all things speed here, and I want to just kind of debrief on everything that you guys have seen, which you guys have seen a lot, obviously, these last 3 weeks now of what we do in there, but the why, necessarily what it is, and it's probably not all familiar with you guys. Maybe some of the coaching cues you guys have heard. So I want to just kind of break those things down. I guess the best place to start is probably just more of acceleration. Okay, so you talk about, and I guess let's just start with organization then up that. So you guys have noticed that our 2 days, right? We sprint on Tuesdays, we sprint on Fridays, are our days that we sprint before we do our lower body. Have you guys been able to notice what we do, what force vector we focus on Tuesdays?
That'd be vertical.
Horizontal.
Horizontal. Okay. What kind of jumps do we do? Broad jumps, right? We work on the broad jumps or the horizontal box jumps, right? Okay. What do we do with the prowlers?
Pushing.
And what angle? Yeah, what angle are we in? Right. It's all pushing back. It's all working on what that we talked about. Starts with a P. One of our main projection. Okay, so we're working on projection and where we're projecting, and so Tuesdays become mainly our horizontal force vector days, right? And then we work our accelerative sprints, our 10s, 20s, which are max effort in nature, but more accelerative in nature as well. So Tuesdays become our more horizontal days, whereas Friday are our what?
Vertical.
It's more of a vertical days. What kind of jumps do we do?
The vertical box.
Do the vertical box jumps. Okay, what are we doing through those little hurdles? What are those called?
Wickets.
Those are called wickets, right? And then we're working our top end mechanics as well because we're sprinting for longer distances with the chains, right? That's where we get our longer distance stuff, our 30s, our 40s, and above and beyond that as we continue to progress through the program, okay? So one thing you guys have heard us talk about a lot, right? We talk about 3 main cues here, or 3 main kind of KPIs that we'll talk about, which is projection, and there's 2 more, right? What about all the skipping that we do, all that stuff? What is that to work on?
Extension.
That's one of the things about this, but all the skipping we're working on. Projection starts with an R.
Rate of force development.
So again, projection, rhythm, and then what's the big thing I talked about, Zal, with guys on their 20s yesterday, when they're coming on that good acceleration phase, and as they're working to come up, the rise. Okay, so really 3 main things that we're looking for to get out of our speed program is isolating those phases, and then finding a way to get them obviously together by we can get timing closer to season, but projection, rhythm, and rise. And I'll tell you guys the best source I've ever seen of all this put together. Okay, there's, when I was coming up, is I'd find a million different sources to kind of put everything together. The best thing I've ever seen communicatively of all this information in one area, one book, one program, you name it, is it's called the Altus Short Sprints course. Now we're going out to Phoenix in March, and we're doing a week there, but we've all taken the certification. And for you guys, I think it's $150. So for most certifications are like $800, $900, $1,000, something like this. This is the cheapest certification I've taken, and I would say it's by far been the most effective one I've taken. But one of the big thing that Altus talks about is that those same 3 things: is projection, rhythm, and rise, and what that is. Okay, so Boyne, just talk to me a minute about projection. What is projection? Why does it matter? Give me a summary of what you understand about projection.
Projection is the ability to put force in one direction and propel your body in the other. Projection is important because depending on where you project force, it dictates where your body moves. The angle of projection is important. If you have projection, say, to vertically, and you're trying to accomplish a faster sprint, you're wasting energy in the wrong direction.
So when I'm in an acceleration phase,
yep,
where am I projecting the majority of my force?
You want it to be as horizontal as you can.
As you can. What does that mean?
In terms of degree, I'd say you would want to focus on something like shin angles at 45.
But you say project as horizontal as I can. Is that general statement? Is that each individual athlete? What does that mean?
Well, each individual athlete, because some guys can get into more extreme angles than others. Just through biomechanics, how guys' bodies are put together. Guys have different lever angles.
Not just through biomechanics. That's one of the reasons. What's another thing that affects my ability to project and my projection angle? That's what he's talking about. Biomechanics and anatomy is what you're getting at. Yeah. What else?
Strength.
right? Strength is a huge thing. Okay, if I don't have strength in certain joint angles, I'm not going to be able to express that. So let me give you an example, right? If I'm in an angle and I'm whatever, maybe I'm really strong from this position, I can squat to this position, but down here I have no mobility, I have no strength. I'm not going to be able to possess this angle on the field, right? Because I have no strength in it. So would that angle still be the best angle for me to play my sport at?
No.
Because I'm not effective in that angle, right?
Yeah.
So that's why you guys see different, I'll coach up different guys that have different projection angles. And then what you guys have seen now, we all talk about the typical, prototypical best projection angle is what?
45
It's 45 degrees in acceleration is what we talk about. It's just very unrealistic for a lot of football players to get there, okay? You even look at some elite athletic sprinters, depending on all those things, biomechanics and size, that's one thing people don't understand is you might be coaching your athletes because you've read one book that said 45 degrees is the correct angle. It's not correct for everybody, right? So what you guys have seen a lot of guys will do a great job of coming out in a low projection angle, but what happens from there?
They rise up.
Okay, so one thing is you see vertical shin, so they'll do this and they'll strike the next step and they'll pop up, okay? Or they can't possess the angle and they do what? They stutter step, right? That's so that it's the example. If I had you stand up and I pushed you from behind, you're not just gonna fall on your face. What are you gonna do? Well, that's what you see when you see football players run, and you see that that's what that is. That's their center mass getting too strong. So a lot of things, a lot of coaches will use for that is what? Project at a higher angle, right? Now, is it quote unquote correct? I mean, I don't know how you want to verbalize that, but it's what's gonna be most effective for that particular athlete. So it's kind of like what we talk about when we're doing these pro day and combine guys right now is, yes, do we want them to project at a lower, more horizontal angle? Absolutely. But if that causes them to have an inefficient second and third step, is it worth it? The answer is no. So we find an angle that that particular athlete can utilize. Okay, so projection, whether that be horizontal or vertical, is dependent on the athlete. Okay. Now in the acceleration phase, Boyne, is there only horizontal force reduction?
No.
No, there's also
Vertical.
why?
As you start to accelerate, your body will naturally start to come up as you're reaching. Instead of putting force back, there's more of a circular motion to the way that your feet are churning in your gait that allows you to, instead of producing a speed, you're maintaining a speed.
Yeah. Okay. If we're to just project horizontally, where is my center of mass going? It's going forward immediately, and that's where I'm going to get that braking motion from. It has to be a gradual rise, right? So I have to gradually rise into it. So there's going to be some vertical displacement, and that's where what you talk about. What is that optimal amount of vertical displacement? Is it whatever? Is it 75 in this? Is it 45 in that? That depends on anatomy, biomechanics, strength, all those things, right? And that's kind of where we get that optimal zone of how we know how to accelerate, okay? But the one thing that I say and I refuse to coach out of the blocks is what? That I always say that people coach this all the time. Starts with an L.
Stay low.
Stay low or lean, okay? Because once again, that's all that's going to promote is guys doing this. Or if you do project at a good angle and then you lean on top of it, that's going to put your center mass too low, and you're going to start doing all the stuttering steps and all the things that we don't want. Okay? So we don't ever coach lean in acceleration. What do we coach? You guys, we've just been talking about it for the last 10 minutes. We coach what? Projection, right? We project, we coach projection angles. And we don't use this cue here, but one thing all this talks about is a high point position, which I don't love it. It's a good concept. It just doesn't relate to me very well as far as the link, but that's what they're talking about is everybody kind of has a different high point position, and that's the angle that you should project out of. And that's where you are most efficient out of is they call it achieving the high point angle. Which here nor there, we're all trying to get to. It's just what your verbiage and what you verbalize it being. So projection and acceleration is not just, I know we talk more about it in acceleration, but as we get into max velocity mechanics, where does that projection change to, Zal?
It would become more vertical.
It become more vertical. Now what about horizontal? Is the horizontal gone at that point?
No, it's just decreased, but not gone.
It's decreased. Okay, so, and that's a lot of like what we see, but that's one thing that I don't know that I fully understood until I really started studying and analyzing biomechanics of sprinting, of really understanding that there still has to be vertical propulsion. And you look at, like I said, Olympic track athletes or just really good sprinters, you see them and you notice, you know, you guys, like I said, you're gonna oscillate. So if your right shoulder and your left hip, they're gonna oscillate as you sprint. So everything's always gonna do this, but you should see that gradual vertical pop every step the guy takes. You should see that in the ground. And when you don't, it means that they're not typically very elastic or reactive in their ankle complex, which is why all the ankle hop stuff that we work with, that's why we do that. For a piece of it at least, okay? So projection, we know that it's always horizontal and vertical, but the degrees of it change based off where we want to project. All right. The next thing we talk about is what? The skipping is
Rhythm.
rhythm. Okay. Coach Heiss, we use a clapping example, right? What is the significance of that example, and what is it?
Well, the significance of it is just it's telling you the cadence at which your feet should be hitting the ground. So if you come out of the blocks and it's fast, and you should go ahead and use the example. If you come out of the blocks and this is what it sounds like, then you're not getting the extension that you need, and you're not going to build into that rhythm that you need. Okay, if you come out of the blocks and you have big, powerful steps, when you get to the top end mechanics, you can go ahead and have those fast feet turning over, but you want to have the elongated, powerful steps to start.
So ground contact time, Coach McNally, out of my stance start is at the highest or lowest it's going to be.
Ground contact time early on will be higher. Once you hit higher speeds, it's going to be much shorter.
Okay, so as I want to apply, you know, I want to really think about applying pressure in the ground as I come out of my 2-point stance, or as I start to accelerate, and those stances are always going to be longer time in the ground with my foot on the ground. As I get into max velocity mechanics, what changes?
Ground contact time.
It's faster, right? Why?
Because you're achieving higher speeds, your foot's in contact with the ground for less. It's more of a vertical, more shallow knee joint, right? So you're not going through as much of a range of motion.
Different mechanics, right? You guys looked at that. We talked about that last week, right? What that upright sprinting mechanic looks like versus an acceleration, right? Acceleration is it acceleration? Is it cyclical?
No.
Is your leg doing this at all? All the dribbling stuff we do, is it doing that? No. It's here to 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 here, and then I get up right. So as you get right, that's when that ground contact time should increase, right? So rhythm for that, just understanding that and not coming out pitter pattering like Coach Heiss gave the example of is your feet. If you come out bang, 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 that's not extension. That's not long ground contact time. We want to punch, right? It's like I said, I think of acceleration like a fist fight, and you have one punch to throw. If I told you you were gonna fight Mike Tyson and you better knock him out in one punch or his ass is gonna beat you up, you better throw the hard one. You're not gonna throw a little jab at him, right? You're gonna throw a haymaker. That's gotta be acceleration. Those first three steps, they gotta be haymaker, haymaker, haymaker. Okay. One of the other big things, Anthony, that we've seen, that we've been talking about a lot, right, is we've been coaching extension a ton. Yeah. It's just making sure that guys aren't losing any force as they extend to the ground, which is great. Okay, but that front knee, this is extending. What is this front knee doing?
Flexing.
It's flexing. Okay, we've talked about low heel recovery. What does that mean?
Less contact with the heel and the ground in each stride.
Not exactly, Shaq.
I would say I was gonna say recovery too, but I feel like it's just more with increasing the rhythm as well.
No, this is good. This is good. It helps me understand what we don't understand. Is that,
It's basically you're not bringing your front knee up too much so that your heel's closer to the ground. It doesn't take as long to.
Exactly. So the idea is, you guys have heard me coach patience a ton. Where did I put that marker? It's in my pocket. Okay. We coach patience a ton here, right? So as a guy extends that bottom leg, what you see a lot of our guys do, because they've been coached this their whole high school careers, is, or I'll see this all the time. How many times have you seen hashtag speed school, right? They're working on their stance start, and somebody puts a freaking hurdle in front of their foot to drive over. You guys seen that before?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, it's riddled on the internet. Okay, so low heel recovery. If this is my body, and that becomes how high my heel is, it takes me, once I extend, it takes me a whole, and look at the angle of my shin here, right? Versus if look at the angle of that shin. So high heel recovery, low heel recovery, right? So low heel recovery, high heel recovery. Does that visually help understand that?
Yes.
This is the shin, this is the foot.
So there's a limit in the knee flexion and the hip flexion to achieve that, correct? I mean, so you want both of them to be at a greater angle.
Yeah, and like I said, I really think most of it is just drilled. It's just repetitions of what they've done. So
Because like
what
to
they
me,
coach to do.
yeah, to me, the first thing I would go to would be to coach the hip flexion and decrease that hip flexion. But as I look at what you're drawing here, you're gonna see a much increased knee angle as well, right?
And this is always indicative of your second step, because not only does this take longer to get back down to the ground, but once again, you got to remember, where is that shin pointing right now? And it's going to pop you straight up. Versus look where this shin is pointing. So this way, I can gradually work to where my next shin, right? I gradually start to rise, and then the next one, and so you can start to gradually build that rise up. Okay. So that's a good segue from rhythm to now rise. Explain to me the importance of what rise is, Zao, and why we need to do it.
Rise would basically help you keep your center of mass within a comfortable range so that you don't fall over as you're increasing your speed.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good definition of it. Okay, and it's just what I said. So it's like think of the example of me pushing you from behind. If I push you from behind, you do this to go again, right? You have to bring your hips back to normal, and then you'd have to push. Well, that's what some guys do every step they sprint. When they're center of mass and they don't have good projection, every step they're contacting here, they have to pull their hips through, and then they can push again for the next. Instead of just landing under my hips or in acceleration, where should my foot contact be in the ground? Behind. It should be behind, right? Slightly behind. Then as we rise up, it gets underneath myself more and more. But without rise, we would have that constant braking motion. So we should gradually rise, and it's the biggest thing you see here is what from high school coaches' heights is do the first 10 yards like this, and then at 12 you should do what?
Stand straight up.
Right? And this is why we do all the dribble bleeding and work on all that stuff with gradual rise. That's not the case, because one, we don't want to run this low, right? Every step should gradually rise up. So whatever this angle is for you, Zao, I don't know what it is. Okay, let me guess. Based off your strength levels, I'm going to say you're probably like a 65-degree guy. Maybe let's say a 60 to 65-degree guy, which probably be optimal for you. That next step should be slightly 67. Whatever. Gradually rise, and now I'm vertical. But that should happen over a span of time. Okay. I think it's probably important to talk about the difference in our athletes that we're coaching, and this is a debate, this is the conversation we can have, versus track athletes, okay? The average Olympic sprinter, does anybody know when they hit max velocity, like their top end speed?
About 60 to 70 meters for each hill.
You did say it.
Objection. Okay. So they're about 60 to 70 meters, okay? It's a long freaking ways to be accelerating. I can't even fathom it. About me thinking about building speed that long, right? At the NFL Combine last year, every single athlete hit max velocity by 15 yards. 15 yards versus 70 meters, okay? So you ask yourself why. Obviously, a lot of it is mechanics, right? The way our sport is, the way most of our guys are pelvic tilt-wise, I think a lot of it is just general mechanics and modalities of what our sport is, okay? But let's go back and talk about this, Heis, is what is our definition of speed? How do I define speed?
How do you define speed?
Related to what? Not related to everything, but related to your specific sport. So speed is different for different sports. Speed is relative based off to what sport we're comparing to. So speed for volleyball, to me, is a different definition than speed for football. It's different than a definition for speed for track. Right? So there are a lot of commonalities, and it's a great thing to study, and you have to understand these concepts, but you can't take everything literal for what I just said, right? That is a wildly large difference. We hit max velocity at 15 yards, they hit it at 70. It's a big difference there, okay? So kind of going through those general things, what questions do you guys have about any and all of this?
Well, in regard to the track athlete hitting top speed at 70 meters, I'm assuming that's in a 100-meter sprint.
Yeah.
So an NFL athlete is hitting 15 yards in a 40-yard sprint. So does it have to do with just the relativeness of distance?
A lot of it is size. Size of the athlete has a really big. The bigger athlete is, the faster they're going to hit it. So, like an offensive lineman, defensive lineman, they're going to hit. They all hit it by like 8.
Yep.
A bigger person is going to hit it at a sooner time. But I understand you're saying relatively, 40 compared to 15 is at like 70 compared to 100.
Yeah.
But a lot of, like I said, it's complete different mechanics too. And a lot of those guys you see in the NFL Combine is they'll get to 15 and then you'll see them just run out. And it's not like they ever shift up into those, unless you're Christian McCaffrey. Very few of them shift up into that position where my heel should be tucked under my butt. I'm in a 90-degree angle here and I'm top end speed. Most of them are where?
Back
heel
here. Kicking.
Heel kicking, right? So they're really backside. That's what you see a lot in football, for a lot of different reasons. So, yeah, I mean, it's something that we just debated and talked about for a long time of necessarily why. I think a lot of it is mechanics. I think a lot of it is our sport is played like this with our hips back to start, and a lot of it is just accelerative base, change of direction more than it is.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that just the nature of the sport. I mean, we talk about all the time we're never going to hit max velocity because we're not running 40 yards in a straight line, but you have to accelerate so often in the sport that just adapt to accelerating faster, or else you're not going to survive.
And that's the thing too, is if there's one thing we do know that the fastest way to get, if I said, hey, the fastest way to get a 10-yard sprint, it would be coming out lower, but that would not be the fastest way to get to 40, if that makes sense. So to hold a lower angle, if I knew I was only going 10, that would be faster. But if I needed to do 40, it wouldn't be faster. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's one thing too, is our guys have adjusted, and remember, all athletes they're just giant compensators. They compensate for problems, and a lot of them do it naturally. Some of them don't do it naturally. Sometimes we have to coach them through it. But that's something that a lot of our guys have done too, is they've compensated for understanding, hey, I'm only going 5 yards, so I'm going to do it at this angle. I'm not running for, and then they've done that for the last 12 years of their lives. So, I think there's your answer right there.
I was going to also say, would it also be because of their ability to generate force out of fast velocity as well?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting argument in general, which is kind of hard to understand. It is one thing that we'll talk about our program. You guys will learn this is we'll eventually get to where those tier 1 guys are deficiency based. Okay, so we'll run a reactive strength index on them, which means we're testing how reactive they are. So do they have muscular strength deficit, as in they're not strong enough to kind of even out the ratio, or are they not elastic enough? Can they not that stretch reflex, is that, or are their joints not reactive enough? They have enough strength, they don't have enough reactivity, and what is that balance? So as we get to that, we kind of try to figure out, what does this athlete need? Does he need more strength work? Does he need more reactive work? Okay. Long story to go back is to think about, I think about track sprinters, like Olympic athletes, the fastest people in the world. They're not that strong, but they're obviously what? They're obviously strong enough. They're strong enough, right? So I think that's the thing that's interesting, is finding what that is of we obviously have different demands. We have to have strong athletes, but at what point are we sacrificing what we do in the weight room for what they really need? This is something that I've talked to you about for years, is what is strong enough? Now, I don't know the answer yet, and this is something I've talked about on the show before many times, is what is that? And will we ever quantify that? Will there ever be a time where I'm like, yeah, 365 that's enough. After that, you don't need to bench anymore. If you can single leg squat 50 pounds, that's enough strength for any amount of force you have to produce on the field.
Yeah, I mean,
is a 405 squat, is that enough?
Johnny Parker, when he was with the Giants in the NFL for a really long time, they just 2 times your body weight, you're done squatting.
Yeah, I mean, and that's to me, like after 500 for an offensive lineman, what is that really improving? You're like, what is that really doing? Where maybe if you got him at 500, okay, that's good. Now let's just start doing single leg stuff, and let's get you moving really well, mobile. Let's get you more elastic. Let's whatever it may be, but. Yeah, it's interesting. That's just an interesting thing in general, Shaq. Of its to me, that's always been like this 170-pound guy who's obviously not very strong, could probably only squat 200, 225 pounds. And then the other end of it, you have Ben Johnson, who was squatting, what, 585, 6 or something like that. They recorded that.
Something like that.
And so it's different in what does the athlete need too, you know?
Because I know for like when I ran track, we'll spend less time in the weight room and more time like just doing field work and stuff like that. Where opposed to like football, you'll spend half and half, but more focused on building strength and then converting that strength into like speed.
Yeah.
I think one thing you got to consider too is that I don't know where, I think I got it from one of the Altus guys, but it's like force production versus force expression aren't necessarily the same thing. So it's like what we were talking about last night.
Yeah.
So you could have a really strong squatter and it takes them, let's say, 200 milliseconds to produce all that force. Well, when your foot's in contact with the ground for 0.08 seconds, like what good is that 600-pound squat going to do for you if you're not applying that force at the right angle, if you're not reactive and elastic with the two, right? So, you know, expression doesn't, you know, it might be a little bit different than just production. Well, when we traditionally think of force production, like let's lift to get really strong, like that might not necessarily lead to us being able to express that force in the way that we need to.
Yeah, and I mean it's where I've gone in my career is certainly heavy weight room on field. You know, when I started, it was we did everything we could in the weight room. On field, we did way too much and way too little at the same time. As in, we did things that were way too low in actual velocities, way too low in recovery time, not enough recovery time, and way too much of it. And as I've shifted, I mean, if you guys have looked at this, you know, on yesterday yesterday's our highest volume day in here, right? Of our lower body week. This is our peak week. This is the most we did, and we did 14 total sets of lower body, right? We did 4 sets of single leg squats, 4 sets of single leg RDLs, 3 sets of hip lifts, and 3 sets of partner rowing. That's like that's way less than what you guys. As you guys get, most people are freaking just slaughtering it in the weight room and doing double or triple that amount of volume. But we talk about microdosing and optimal load for guys, and then we're out there and we're obviously sprinting. We're sprinting at very high velocities. We're very specific about yardages and what we're trying to accomplish in percentage of max velocities. We auto-regulate our sprinting, and so what we've, you know, at least in my time as a head strength coach, has certainly shifted to. I think the importance of the on-field stuff is significantly greater, and obviously positional. There's those arguments as well. We do a little more stuff in here with the big guys, and we do skills, but what we do out there to me is our bread and butter from a standpoint of. I believe if you increase sprint speed and you sprint, you'll get stronger. I think from the amount of neuromuscular demands and just what we call, you know, like the neurological ingrainment of that, of what that's going to bring into a weight room, I think that's what helps cross the bridge is the sprinting stuff you do. And there's things in here that I really like, and I see and when we get into our box band speed stuff, I see so many results in every direction. Like that's probably my favorite thing we do in here when we get to that cycle and we start hitting box band speed squats and the way that kind of crosses over what we do on the field. But from a standpoint of injury reduction, from a standpoint of like I said, crossing those bridges, I think sprinting and what you do on the field is what we'll learn is honestly more important than what we're doing in here to me. Like, you know, we talked about this the other day. If you said, hey, you can do one hamstring movement, only thing you have to prevent hamstring injuries, you get one, and you said it's all you're allowed to do all year. Which one do you think I would take out? You've seen us do single leg RDLs. You've seen us do eccentrics, isometrics. Okay, what do you think I would do?
I'll probably go with RDLs and
Boyne, what do you think I would do?
I think that stuff just in the weight room or weight room and the field.
Just one hamstring movement.
I think you would sprint.
I would sprint. That would be the one. If you gave me one option of, hey, this is what you need to do to help prevent hamstring injuries, you get one. This is the only posterior chain movement you can do. I would sprint. I would program sprinting. That's what I'd be. So I consider that. I consider sprinting hamstring volume for us. Okay, but as we've built up and as we continue to do this, and I think what we continue to find with our GPS and what we see is that's essential. I mean, it's night and day. When you see a guy spike in volume and it's something he's not done before, and it doesn't matter how much stuff he's done in the weight room, it's how much sprinting has he done, and that's just the truth. And to me, a guy, you can take Giovanni Ruiz, okay, one of our athletes from whatever, he blew up on ESPN for being able to do a Nordic hamstring, and he could do like whatever, 6 of them, incredibly strong hamstrings. Guess what happened to him the second day of camp?
Pulled a hamstring.
He pulled his hamstring. Why did he pull his hamstring?
Oh, because he didn't.
He
use
didn't
that,
sprint.
yeah.
He didn't sprint. He didn't sprint at those volumes as he currently has been doing. It was a big spike from what he had done, what he was exposed to, and then all of a sudden he went into camp and spiked. And what happened to his hamstring? It's not rocket science, but you take guys, and we see guys who don't have muscular injuries. It's guys that don't have those spikes, so we need to prepare them for that volume, right? If James Patterson has ran 10-yard sprints over and over and over again, but then he goes into spring ball week 1 and it's his first time being exposed to a 30-yard sprint, what's likely going to happen?
Pull a hamstring.
Either we're going to create a lot of soreness or we're going to get injured. And so exposing these guys to those volumes, I think, is massively essential. And then being used to that, and we know that Mike Gilson said this to me like years ago. It's like there's no such thing as a guy overtraining. There's only such thing as a guy being underprepared. And I think that's the best thing about the GPSs that we have is now we know what that is. Like we can quantify and say this is what we need to be ready for at the University of Buffalo. We know that for our guys to not overtrain, they need to be prepared for this. So when we sat down and wrote this program, what do you think we looked at? The first week of spring ball of last year. What were the volumes we were exposed to? So what do you guys think the last week of training before spring ball is going to get us into?
The same volume.
Those volumes. So that the first day of spring ball isn't like oh my gosh, I've only been doing 5-yard sprints and now I'm running 40s over and over and over again. So our volume will match that. So it's not about being overtrained in spring ball. If we don't get there, it's either because one, I'm not doing a good job with the coaches of explaining to them, hey, we need to this is not what we've done in the past and we're not ready for it, or two, we didn't do a good job preparing for it. So we really don't have those excuses anymore. But I think a lot of that is done via sprinting, and that's everything, right? You can talk about change of direction, you can talk about all those things. You don't want the first time that these guys experience that to be on the field in live football. And I think those are the best things we can do for that. Other questions, guys?
So the week before you go into, say, spring ball, you don't want to go in. You want to increase the volume to match what you're going to experience in spring ball, but you also want to give the guys enough time to recover before spring ball.
Right. So this is our peak week. This is going to be our highest volume week. So we know that the highest player load we'll have the first week of spring ball for us is about 500-ish. Just throwing a number out there. Okay. We need to hit that we need to hit that tomorrow, which we will. With the team tech and with conditioning, that's planned to hit that tomorrow. So they will have that exposure to that. And then what are they going to have to do the next day? They're going to have to go back out and sprint with us again on Friday. So having that demand of spring ball is much easier to manage because there's time to dissipate fatigue. We have those days in between, which help us out a ton. But that's with the understanding that the coaches are going to also slowly build them up. So the coaches are going to take it from there. It's not just, the first day is going to be 500, then it's going to be 850. They understand, and we've had that conversation, the first day is going to be 500, the second day is going to be 550, the third day is going to be 650, and there's days of rest in between that. So that is essentially important, whereas I've been in a situation before where it was the volume is going to be 900 every single day, and you better find a way to figure it out. Those are the ones that are really tough to figure out. This scenario is very, very easy, and it's easy to talk through, and it's easy because it's more, the relationship I have with coaches, we have those discussions often, and so that makes all of this very, very easy. But most people or most situations don't have that. It's day one is a bloodbath, and that's just what it's going to be, and it's going to be a huge spike, and there's not much. But that's why the one thing that Connor talks about that he really took away from Gavitt is, you have to know what the end. You have to know the end in the beginning. Like you have to know that if this is where we're starting, you got to know what that end goal is. So like by the end of summer, we know what our peak practice is. So we will take an example. Well, let's say our peak practice is here. Well, the idea is that we are smart and our line getting there is here. It's not there, right? This is how injuries happen.
Yep, the spike.
It doesn't necessarily matter where this is. If you're more of a progressive coach, you're probably closer to here. If you're working for more of an old school coach, you're probably here. And you know what? That just means that we have to be smart enough to change our job, or change what we do. So obviously, this I would have to change the trajectory. Are you going to have some issues along the way? When you don't have it, just depends. How much time is this? Is
4 weeks,
Is
we have
this,
casualties.
is this 4 weeks? You're going to have some casualties, right? If it's 8 weeks, you might be okay. If it's 12 weeks, probably pretty good. If it's 16 weeks to prepare for that, if it's an entire year, that's when we know what we're doing. That's when we can have a very successful program. So this is imperative to understand as you're preparing your athletes is I think too many people start with this in mind and not really knowing where this is. That's why we're always going to define this. I'm always going to have a conversation with the coaches so that we're on the same page about what this is, and then we're always going to work our way to it. So that is an essential piece to make sure that we don't have any of this, because when you're not on the same page with your coaches and this happens, that's when you start losing guys all the time. Okay.
So sorry to cut you off.
No, you're
So
good.
you'll still have peak weeks during spring ball. So we're gonna deload next week.
We will be, because of the way this will work, and we can pull up that. We'll look at this chart later. We have all of our weeks progressively how they work throughout the season. We'll do 2 deload weeks in a row here. So we will deload them next week after this peak week, and then because volume in the field house with practice is going to spike, and it's going to be new anxiety levels, it's going to be new things for everybody. We'll stay low in here again.
Okay.
So we'll go low to recover, and then we'll go low in here because they're going to be high in there
Yeah.
to accommodate for that. And then we'll get into what will become our gradual buildup. Okay, by week 4, you think they're pretty adapted to what we're doing on the field house, which they should be, and that will become our peak week then. Then we'll deload week 1 out of spring ball.
Gotcha.
You get done with spring ball, you might be a little bit beat up. Okay, we'll peak them, we'll work into the scrimmage, and then deload for a week, ramp them up for 3, and then get back into our normal cycle.
Okay.
So since projection angle is determined by both the biomechanics of the person and their strength level, if the same person increases their strength, would they be able to like use a lower projection angle in the future, or
Would they both be able? Are you saying like would they both be able to express it the same way, or
like would their projection angle be able to decrease if the same person increases their strength, or would their anatomy still?
yeah? So it's yes, but it's not necessarily. It'd be all situational because there's a lot of things that have to go into that. It's what Coach McNally said. There's between force expression and force production. Just because I can now produce 12,000 pounds of force in the ground, but I can't do it efficiently or effectively, I can't express it, that doesn't work, right? So not only do they have to be able to, they might get that new force production, but they have to be able to project it as well. There's a lot of things that go into that, right? So even something as small as ankle mobility, right? If I don't have enough ankle mobility to get myself into a good shin angle position, it doesn't matter how much strength I have, I'm not gonna ever be able to get into that movement. So I can get my squat up 300 pounds, but if I don't have the mobility or the elasticity or the rigidity to express it, it's all for nothing. And that's why everything is a balance. It's why as you go through program, we work on more of a vertical axis of, if you look at our program, something is always emphasized, right? This phase is called what?
Adaptation.
It's neural ingrainment, right? So and it's an adaptation phase too, and in fact we're adding body to it. But so it's neural ingrainment. We're trying to ingrain motor patterns into our guys right now and get guys moving well. That's the main emphasis. But you see, there's still max strength development, right? We're still working a ton of time under tension. There's still power production. We're doing a shit ton of sprints. We're working all those things, right? So we're still working power output. We're still doing tempo, so we're still working aerobic capacity. We're still working those things. You get into those later circuits, right? What happens to the volume? It goes way up, so we're still working hypertrophic qualities. So all those things that go into a program, they're always present, but there's always something emphasized. The further away from football we are, it'll be more max strength, and the closer we get, like in our last phase, our last block of summer training, we won't max effort back squat. It'll be a purely power output box band dynamic effort squat. And then those zones will depend on what your position is, whether you're a linebacker, offensive lineman, or skill will depend on how fast those tendo units need to read. But so it kind of, it's always kind of swinging one way or the other, right? And we'll work more strength out of season, away from season. As we get closer, that will start to shift down, and power output will start to shift up, right? Aerobic capacity, alactic power, those kind of things will start to really work into the program as we get closer to season training. So it's really, to me, it's everybody's going to do it differently. You guys might do it differently than I do, you know, when you guys are head guys someday. I need to see it all. I need to see the entire picture painted together, and then I'll go through and I'll cut parts out and I'll put other things in. I can't do where a lot. I know good strength coaches that do this. They'll program 1 week at a time. I can't do that because I need to know this. I need to know where in my head I see this working. I need to know where we need to finish. That's just how my brain works. I couldn't. I would have so much anxiety and stress if I just did this, chunk this out 1 week at a time, and just there we're gonna go. Like I couldn't operate like that. So to me, I would say, I don't know, what percentage of our program do you guys think I change on an annual basis? If you said that if there's 100% piece of the pie, what percent of that pie do you say that we adapt things and change?
I don't know if there's a ton of change. I think that you program liberally and then you coach conservatively. So we pull things out of it. It allows you to kind of have the menu of what you want to do, and you can pull some things out of it. I wouldn't say it's more than 15%.
Yeah. I mean, it's. But I would say 95% of our training sessions aren't what they say on paper. 90%. I mean,
correct. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Think about we had hip lifting in the program for 4 weeks. How many weeks have we done it? 2.
But that's what I was saying. You
Right.
program liberally, and then you can go ahead and make those decisions on the fly because you already have it planned out.
Yeah, and that's just how my brain works. I program. I would say ideally, I program and said, if these athletes do everything they're supposed to do, they take care of their bodies, they show up, they're mentally tough. I don't have to do any like hard drilling. I don't have to put them through 100 up downs. This is I program from an ideal standpoint. This is the idea. If I was training an NFL athlete who had all the money of recovery and everything, this is how I would train them. And then from there, I cut things out of, hey, I know the guys, whatever, they had a tough weekend, something happened, and so Monday they're not going to be ready to rock and roll, or you know, whatever it may be. But yeah, I like to have my full menu in front of me,
Right.
And I like to see how that all works together, and then we change and we adapt constantly based off of what they see. But even like I talked to these guys, heard me say to these two guys is, I'm organic and fluid inside of a training session. There might be something, you know, especially when we're sprinting, there might be something that I see that I'm like, man, we're just really not rigid and reactive today. So we're going to spend more time hopping and working rhythm. There might be a day that we're I'm just like, dang, we're cooking, and then we're going to sprint. Like we're going to take when they're ready to eat, and I can tell their bodies are ready to eat, I'm going to feed them. And that's kind of what it is. When they're not, I'm not. And I'm, you know, it's, different coaches have different ways, but you know, I think you need to be really smart with how gritty you are with players and those kind of things. I think team building and team culture is absolutely essential. You cannot win without it. But I think you can also do it intelligently. You know, I think at the end of the day, like the fourth quarter program, that's where we get non-scientific and, you know, but I think that's essential. But the most important thing about that, guys, is that they think it's hard. It doesn't actually need to tax their bodies a ton. You don't need to kill the kids. The most important thing is that they leave there going, man, that was tough. We did that together. We came together as a unit. And when you get that, you've now killed 2 birds with 1 stone. You haven't crushed them, and they're leaving there thinking that,
Killed 3 because you want to call it non-scientific, but really we took a look at it, and it's 6 hard reps of changing direction, which is fantastic.
and it's about 6 seconds on, 29 seconds off.
Yep, and so I don't know how. Yeah.
Well, I'm more referring to the way that we.
Right. I know.
I've been coached to do it in the past, and now that you know, like I didn't always have control over this program in the past. When I was at Akron, it was a head coach thing, and it was different. And now I have all reign over what we do in there. And so, yeah, if you took a stopwatch out, most of our drills are 6 seconds on, 29 seconds off. Then there's about 90-second break between sometimes. It pretty much matches our tempos. Our tempo runs to an extent. So it's definitely gotten better. That's for sure.
Alright, so quick question. So do you program your tempo run would you change it up gearing towards the actual season?
Yeah, so it's and we will go through. I'll do a presentation with our conditioning too. It progresses all the way through to right now. It's more of it's really an aerobic endeavor. It's aerobic, and we're trying to really work aerobic capacity. Now it's intelligent about how we do it, but as we get closer to the season, it becomes much more about alactic capacity. So it shifts to higher velocities, right? A little bit longer recoveries, and we're really focusing on our alactic abilities.
The lactic tower on the big boys too.
Yeah, so more or less, it'll progress. So everything's straight line right now, right? Then it will go into swiveling. Then it will go into one change of direction. Then it will go into multiple changes of direction. Then it will go into position specific. So that's when we're working 4 10-play drives in the summer, where the linebackers are sprinting 10 yards, shuffling to the right, hopping over bags, and then a 6-second drill. Trying to emphasize as much of that alactic window as we can, right? So we'll go 6 seconds on, 20 seconds off for 10 straight times, and then they'll take a 5-minute rest, and then we'll hit it again, and take a 5, and then we'll do it again. So it progresses from least specific to most specific, which most of our program does. Kind of everything is much more generalized now, and as these guys get further and further in the program, we get more and more specific.
When you say alactic, that's just the production of lactic acid.
No, okay. Lactic is the production of lactic. So anything, more or less to me, anything that's going to be high intensity for so that position specific is a lactate accumulation phase for us, because that's about all you're going to have in football. You might accumulate some lactic acid, but you're not really ever going to be in a lactic phase of where you go to a 14-play drive. You're going to be accumulating some lactic acid just based off of not having enough recovery to eliminate all that lactic acid. But for us, mostly alactic qualities, we're talking about operating in that 0 to 6 second window, not extending past it, and being able to recover fully from it.
Oh, I just wanted to simply go over the definition of alactic.
Yeah, so I guess it's not going to accumulate lactic acid. So we're talking about 0 to 6 minute window. And what I'll do is 6-second window. Sorry. What I'll do is I'll go through our conditioning program with you guys, so you guys can kind of see and understand how I break up, because there's a lot of synonyms in this industry, which is highly frustrating. So I look at things at either really aerobic or alactic, and I call it aerobic intelligence of what we do, because I think there's such thing as conditioning. There's aerobic intelligence, and then there's aerobic debauchery, where you just take guys out and you just run stadium stairs for 10 hours. That's being aerobically non-intelligent. Tempos is more. It's a higher velocity. It's more specific to our sport, right? And so you're gonna have higher speeds that are more relatable. We're gonna develop some of the qualities that we use in our sport. So training with tempos and kind of working with the progression, that's how you develop more what I call aerobic intelligence. But any form of tempo is an aerobic endeavor. That's what you always have to remember. We can just make it more alactic in nature based off of how we do it. And so I'll go through that, because that's an hour and 15-minute conversation by itself. So I'll go through that in more detail. But that's good to know to explain that as well.
So would you say it's like training to a point where you're at a high intensity, but you're not really accumulating a lot of lactic acid?
Right. So like I said, that'll happen sometimes in football, just very rarely. Yeah. Right. Most of it is 6 seconds on, 29 seconds off, for about 6 to 10 times in a row, and they go sit down for 15 minutes, 10 minutes, right? And then they back them, and then they're doing it again. So trying to train that way, if there's very few 15-second full-out sprints where you're accumulating a ton of lactic acid, and then you have a 7-second break, and then you have another 12 seconds. So there's little lactic acid accumulation. Now, does it happen? Yes, absolutely. Could someone post something and give me the one example of when it happened? Yeah, yes, you could certainly find that. Okay? But very, very few times in the game of football are there extended plays past 6 seconds. Are there? If we were one of those spread offenses that rattled off plays every 13 seconds, would we have to condition differently?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. But guess what we do here? Our average play is 6 seconds, and our average rest is about 29 to 30. So we fit about
around 104 offensive plays.
Yeah. So it just, once again, you have to know your program too. If I went and took the job at Florida tomorrow, would I run a different program, yeah, that would be tailored to those athletes, to the way they play, the way those coaches coach, and what the demands are. You have to understand the demands to be able to write the program.
Yeah, I mean, there's a much different demand on the conditioning when I was in the Big 12 for the last 3 years because of the way they play football in the Big 12, right? What he's talking about. They snap the ball every 13 seconds. They're throwing it down the field, and you gotta be prepared for that.
There's a deep ball.
Yeah, you can't.
And so in that case, would there be more or less lactic acid accumulation? More, right? Because you're sprinting for 6 seconds, but then you only have 13 seconds to let your body try to eliminate. One thing that you gotta realize about lactic acid is you guys are all producing it right this second. Your body's never not producing lactic acid. It's just the rate at which we're producing it is significantly lower than the rate at which we're able to dissipate it right now. As we start sprinting and increasing intensity, the rate at which lactic acid is produced is higher, and the rate at which we're able to get rid of it, obviously we can't get rid of it the same. And then there's that lactic acid threshold, right, where we go past that, where it's I am no longer able to get rid of this lactic acid at the rate that I can produce it. And that was like the big thing about Lance Armstrong.
Yeah,
is they measured Lance Armstrong, and he was more or less able to dissipate lactic acid at the exact same rate that he was generating it. So for me and you, Jack, we get on a bike, right? And we're pedaling. There's a time that we're gonna hit that lactic acid threshold where we just go whoosh, and we literally you physically can't pedal through it. You hit it, you have to decrease intensity. There's no way to get through it. He was at the point where he could just cycle, and he would, as the rate he was producing it, his body was getting rid of it, so he could just keep going and going and going and going.
In addition to the drugs.
Yeah, I was gonna say in addition to blood doping.
Yeah, blood doping works really well. So,
but that actually was a natural occurrence in his body. He was ridding us that lactic acid threshold was absurdly high.
Yeah. Okay, what else? Let's do about one more here.
I got just one thing to add on top of that. When we look at just like energy system development for sports and stuff like that, I think it's really important when you are trying to figure out what the demands are. Watch the player, not necessarily the ball, right? So if you're looking at soccer or even like hockey or basketball, right? A lot of times it is a short acceleration, maybe a change of direction or two, and then it's a lot of very low intensity jogging, or in the case of hockey, let's say, it might be a couple of strides on skating where we're accelerating, and then it's I'm just kind of coasting here. So if you look at the average shift time and you say, oh, he's on the ice for 45 seconds at a time, we need to do nothing but 45-second intervals on the bike to get ready for that. Well, chances are it is very much more like what you might see in football, where it's short burst, brief intermittent period of relative low intensity, right? So it's not always just balls to the wall for that time period, right? So watch the player. I think it's a Charlie Francis quote. Watch the player, don't watch the game, and that can help you kind of with figuring out what you want to do from an energy system development standpoint.
And even just from a bio, the way I watch football is completely different from the way most people watch football. Is I literally watch for shin angles. I watch for decelerative steps. How many, if a receiver is running a comeback route, how many steps is he taking to decelerate and then come back off the ball? What are his shin angles in those decelerative patterns? When do they start to shift this way? What are his shoulders doing as he's decelerating? What is that defensive end center of mass coming off the ball? What does his shin angle look like? What is his ankle mobility? You look at an offensive lineman, you can look at one thing I look at a lot of offensive linemen as they play is I look at their ability to move at the hip in the hip capsule. A lot of guys who don't have internal rotation have a really hard time expressing their hips a lot of times. I think we have a tackle that had that issue a lot previously, and we worked on a lot last year. He had a lot more success this year of just freeing up some of that range of motion inside their hips so you can actually express that force, not just be able to produce it. So yeah, I think you guys start to, it's just like I took a cinematography class once in college, and I hated it because for the next 6 months I couldn't even enjoy a movie, because then you all of a sudden you take this cinematography class and you learn about all these angles, the power angle, and the whatever. I can't remember any of it now, but that's why I literally had to try my hardest to forget everything because I couldn't enjoy a movie. So I'm like, oh, that was a terrible power angle. What was that? And I was like, I watched movies in a whole different light after that, and I'm just like, man. And so I literally tried to, because when I watch movies, I don't want to be in an analyzer mode. I want to be in just a relaxed watch mode. But in football, people would probably go nuts if they had to watch it through my brain, because that's all I'm doing the entire time is I'm watching it from angles and biomechanics and hip position and arm position and center of mass position. So you start to watch those things, you see things a lot different. You see things a lot different. What else?
Covered a lot.
Yeah, does that help? Does that help kind of clear up a lot of things and just, I guess, solidify them for you guys? And and that's the important thing is as you guys have these experiences, is getting to what it really doesn't matter because it's not always transferable. What we do here doesn't mean it's going to be the best for the next job you have or internship you have. You have to understand why. And that's the best thing. If you guys leave here and you don't know why we do what we do, you haven't done a good job of asking questions. Not just a what is that, how do you do it? That's great because you want to be able to teach it, but if you don't know why, how can you fully believe in it? Whether you choose to take this entire program and say that's my new philosophy, or you decide to take 5% of it or 50%, I don't care, but I want you to know the whys, why we're doing what we're doing and why we're coaching what we're coaching. You have to be a teacher. At least that's my opinion. I think the best strength coaches in America are teachers. They teach their athletes. It's not just this is what we're doing, but this is why we're doing it. So obviously, if you're going to teach it, you better know why. When a football player comes up to you and says, "Hey, why? Why do we have to put our back in that position?" I want you guys to be able to explain it. So make sure as you guys are continuing to watch and evaluate, find out why, and the things you don't know why, ask one of us and bring those things up. Hey, why did we program this? And I noticed that you changed this to this on this there. You took that away. Why'd you do that? Why do you coach the straight leg, or walking toe pull, right? Most people coach broke back here, which is fine because it's a neural flossing thing. So it's a neural flossing thing in the hip to really bend the back and tuck the chin. That's one way to do it. For me, I don't like the way that we hinge here yet in the weight room. I don't think it's natural enough yet for us in that position to really understand. So I try to link as much stuff as I can. So do we lose the neural flossing aspect of this? Yes, but we still get a hell of a hamstring stretch, and we can solidify that set back position that we talk about. We can start to coach things in multiple places. Just like you hear us talk about high chest in the weight room, and then we talk about that stick position. Well, we changed the name of it to instead of a loaded position, which I called my entire career, because we were having a hard time knowing the high chest position in here and really getting this down. We changed what I've always called the loaded position to now the high chest position. It doesn't matter. It's just either bar in your hand or hands back. And so you make those small things, but no